Hey, how's it going? It's Joe from Townsend Tours, back again for another video. I don't know if this one's going to be out on time because I'm in the middle of moving house. That's why you can't see the Cheltenham flag in the background, because I've already packed that away. But that's enough of that. Let's get on with today's video. This one will be about my road trip along the Great Ocean Road, and here we go. Me and my friend picked up the car a little later than we should have, and my inexperience with driving was still showing because we couldn't move the gear stick at first. We asked the person who was renting out the car how we did it because my last car was different and I couldn't figure it out, and she showed us straight away, but it was exactly what we were trying to do in the first place, but it worked for her and it wasn't working for us. She'd already buggered off back into the office and we was trying all sorts of things to try and get it to work. We spent a solid 5 minutes trying to figure it out because I told my friend we are not asking her again. Eventually we worked out that I had to put my foot on the brakes as well as moving the gear stick, which I didn't know before. And the person who was sitting in the office must have been thinking, what on earth are they doing just sitting in the car park for like 5 minutes? But eventually we found out what to do and we was on our way. As we got closer to the first stop, the roads became a bit more exciting rather than like the standard motorways. There was one point that we was going along a hillside which just kept going up and down, that our stomachs started to feel funny. But on the last hill climb we finally got a glimpse of the ocean, so we knew we were getting close. Bells Beach was the first stop that we went to, which had a crazy packed car park, which I don't like because I'm rubbish at parking. I haven't had much practice in about 3 years. But that's enough of that for now. The view was spectacular and it kind of got us excited because the reality was starting to set in and we was imagining what the next set of beaches and the next set of attractions were going to be like. And then coming out of the car park I nearly hit someone, but well, I didn't hit them, so they're fine, so let's just move on. Aries Inlet was the next place that we were going to. It offered great views of the sea and the cliffs, but this time it came with a lighthouse. We were feeling a bit peckish at that point, so we chose our spot on one of the headlands to have our lunch, which offered great views on both sides. And then after that came another car park pressure situation. Basically a bunch of cars were queuing up waiting to nab my spot. Dealt with it fine, and luckily on the next place I didn't have that problem because there was no car parking at all. We were trying to get to Lawn Beach, but because we couldn't find a spot we just skipped it and went to the next one, which was Teddy's Lookout. It was a struggle to get to it because the road was so steep. I was struggling to get more than like 5 kilometers per hour, and at one point I thought my car was just going to start rolling back, but luckily we made it, and it was probably my favourite site out of all of them because you got a great view of the beach like many of the others, but you also got a view down the valley and onto the hillside, which was covered in trees. So it's probably up there as one of my favourites, and I think it was Rob's too. We had to go a bit further inland for our next stop, which was Erskine or Erskine Falls. I'm not 100% sure how you pronounce it. We went there to see a waterfall and we got 2 for the price of 1 after nearly getting my car door ripped off by a car coming down the steep narrow hill. We went to see the small waterfall first. No, not that one, this one, yeah. It was a bit tricky to get up to because it was a steep rock climb and I only had one hand to climb with because I was holding on to the camera with the other one. So I probably could have thought of a better idea, but it's happened. Just to give you an idea of what the drop-off was like, here's a view. And then after that we went to the larger waterfall, which was very waterfall-esque, unsurprisingly. I don't know what it is about waterfalls, they just seem to soothe everyone, myself included. So following that was another car park nightmare. It wasn't a problem with the car parking situation itself, it was a problem with the car. I put in the wing mirror because it was just asking to get ripped off. And then when I tried to push it back out into position, it wasn't budging. And this wasn't really something that I can call roadside assistance for to fix. And I didn't want to push it too hard in case I broke it because it was only a rental car. And so the tried and tested technique of just bashing something until it works struck again, and the wing mirror went into position and we was off again. We made our way to Kennet River next to see a koala. We saw one, it was my first wild one. We called him Roger, and then we just set off again because we only went there just to see a koala. En route to the next few locations, we were starting to look up where we were going to camp for the night and when we would need to stop going along the Great Ocean Road and make our way to the campsite. So we had enough time to go to Mariner's Lookout and Apollo Bay. I don't think I enjoyed those two as much as I could have because we were kind of rushing at that point, so if I'd spent a bit more time I think I would have enjoyed it more, but they were both beautiful, they were both great. We did have enough time to go around Mate's Rest, which was a rainforest walk. It's basically a loop for a rainforest, My friend was constantly on his toes because he has a fear of snakes, and in his mind that was the perfect location for snakes to hide. There was also a bunch of strange looking trees, which was cool to see. Our last stop of the day was at Cape Otway Fly. We went there to see a lighthouse, but it was all closed off, so we didn't get to see it. Instead, we just saw a bunch of sinister looking trees before making our way to our campsite for the night. The campsite was about an hour and a half away from where we were, so we wanted to get there before sunset. Parts of the journey made us feel sick again, not because we were going up and down all the time, more side to side, which is quite common along the Great Ocean Road because of all the hills around there. We arrived at an abandoned farm and we thought, oh great, we've got the wrong place, we're in the middle of nowhere, what are we going to do? We thought the map was wrong or the information that we had was out of date, so we were just going along different dirt roads trying to find the campsite. At one point we was met by a wild goat, so we turned around and kind of gave up at that point. So we put in the information in my phone thinking it would hopefully get a different result, and we did. We found the lake that the campsite was by and we chose our spot, pitched up the tent, and we was all ready just before sunset to have our dinner, have a drink, and then go to sleep for the night. We got up early and made our way to Lavers Hill without even realising that's where we were the day before to get petrol. The road there led through a forest. It was constantly bending with steep drop-offs and it was kind of semi-dirt road, so I had to be really careful with my driving, but luckily there was nobody else on the road except for this little fella and a few parrots that flew past. This bit might seem a bit out of place because I only realised whilst editing that I forgot to mention about the spider that dropped on our windscreen whilst driving through Lavers Hill. So if you're squeamish about spiders, kind of look away for a bit and I'll tell you when it's safe to look again. Alright, it's safe to look and I'll just continue with the video now. We were making our way towards the 12 Apostles, which is probably one of the most famous attractions on the whole route. We even learnt about it in our geography class once. But before we got to see those, my friend Rob had to confront his fear because there was a snake on the public path that led up to the rocks. He just kind of blanked it out. It's like, no, can't see it. So just going to keep walking forward. And then eventually we got to the rocks. For me, it was more impressive to see the waves, but that doesn't mean I wasn't in awe of the whole setting because it was all splendid. The next place we went to was Lockhart Gorge, but we had to skip it because there was no spaces to park, so we went to the Baker's Oven instead, see if you can spot the oven. The road leading up to it was dreadful. I was surprised that my car was left unscathed, but I could say that about a number of the roads. Then following that we went to London Bridge. Nope, not that one, that's Tower Bridge. Not that one either. This one, yeah. I don't know where it gets the name from, so if you do know, just let me know, or I could have looked it up, but I haven't. So yeah. And after that we went to the grotto, which was surprisingly another rock formation and another glimpse of the ocean, but I did prefer this one because it framed the ocean quite well. And it also gives me a chance to speak about another car park conundrum. We was waiting in a queue for the car park and the car in front of me reversed to let out another car. Then that car took the space. But when the car in front of me was reversing, I quickly switched to reverse, but I didn't move. I was just in reverse in case I had to move. And then that car in front of me took its space. I quickly took another one shortly afterwards. But then when I got out of the car, I realised the two cars behind me were arguing away because they bumped into each other. So I don't know if I'd caused that, but I don't think I could have. And so I just carried on and saw the grotto. We breezed through the Bay of Martyrs and the Bay of Islands because I think we both had reached our saturation point of seeing rocks and the ocean. So instead we had our lunch at the sand dunes at Warrnambool. I don't know if I said that right, but I'm just going to go with it. There was an impressive sand sculpture there of an octopus climbing a sand castle. And then after that we went to see our last spot in the state of Victoria, which was Port Fairy, and it was absolutely stunning. Clear blue waters, white sands, butterflies everywhere, yet I was angry the whole time. Basically, as we came into the car park, I scratched the underside of the bumper on a rock, and I wasn't sure if I was going to be liable for a $2,500 fine because the rental place had a rule: if a scratch was bigger than a certain circle size, then you'd have to pay the money, and we wasn't sure if it was bigger than that circle or not. But eventually I kind of put it in the back of my mind as we made our way to South Australia. We were going there to see Mount Gambier, and it also gave me an opportunity to see another Australian state, which now makes it 4 for me, which is half the Australian states. As we were coming up to the border, there were signs saying please throw your fruit in the quarantine bins. But as we crossed the border, we were a little bit worried if we were breaking some kind of law because we had some grapes and some apples in the car, but we weren't going to get them out to eat or anything like that. But the thought of being arrested for being a fruit smuggler kind of made us worry a little bit less. Mount Gambier has a number of attractions and sites across the area. We were going to see Thurston's Sinkhole and the Blue Lake. The sinkhole was like an underground garden utopia, and it was so deep that we couldn't even be bothered to walk all the way to the bottom. But then again, it doesn't take that much to put us off walking. But the Blue Lake overshadowed that by far. The blueness was so amazing, and I'm colourblind and I was amazed how blue it was. We then started the 4.5-hour journey home back to Melbourne via the Grampians National Park. I figured out how not to have my fog lights on all the time, unlike in Sydney. I also did my first drive-through, and I remember my driving instructor telling me you're not a proper driver until you've done a drive-through, so I did that. I think we worked out over the 4 days of driving that I did on this trip and in Sydney, I had done over 2,000 miles, which is about a fifth of the way to the UK, and I loved the driving. There was such a variety of roads, and I sometimes went hours without seeing another car. I want to thank cameraman Rob for taking pictures and videos whilst I was driving. I also want to thank the rental guy for not spotting the scratch or not charging us for the scratch, because that was such a massive relief. That's it for this week. The next video will be going over my last few days here in Melbourne and my move to my new house. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching it. If you have enjoyed it, just give it a thumbs up. If you wish to follow me, you can always subscribe or follow me on Instagram, Facebook or Twitter. There's also my website, www.townsendtours.com, where I post daily updates. And just remember, explore and enjoy.